Dirtle Magic. Thank you for tuning in to Dirtle Magic. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell if you like the content you see here today, and leave a like and share the video with someone you might think is interested. Leaving those likes really helps us out, but another way to help us out is by using our TCG Player affiliate link below. If you're looking for singles, sealed product, or gaming accessories, please consider using our link to support the channel. We also have some playmats at inkgaming.com. Go ahead and hit the link in the description to check those out. Alright, let's grab some spells and dirtle with some magic. Hello and welcome back to Dirtle Magic. Today on this episode of the Dice Bag, we have news. If you haven't heard it already, it's probably spreading like wildfire at this point, is Hullbreacher has been banned in Commander. Now, initially, I wasn't going to do a video on this. Everybody else was already getting to it. I didn't feel like I could add anything to the conversation, but then I was reading the comments online. Specifically people who feel like this ban was just bad and not giving too much explanation as to why they thought it was bad, at least none that I've run into anyway. Besides that, they had maybe just bought the card, or maybe they felt like there are other cards that needed to be banned, or why the other cards mentioned in the article, which I'll link below, aren't banned but are only being watched. So let's go ahead and discuss that a little bit, and I want to give you my opinion on why this card definitely deserved to be banned, and I'm happy it's now burning in the 9 hells of Phyrexia. Here's the actual piece of the article that will be linked below, and it says basically this is banned because it has been a problem card since its release. Its ostensibly defensive use against extra card draw has been dwarfed by the offensive capability, combining it with mass draw effects to easily strip players' hands while accelerating the controller. The play pattern isn't something we want prevalent in casual play, see Leovold's ban, and we have seen a lot of evidence that is too tempting even there. As it combines with wheels and other popular casual staples, the case against the card was overwhelming. There remain a few similar cards that are still permitted, notably Notion Thief and Narset Parter of Veils. The additional hoops required, and additional color pip for Notion Thief and Sorcery Speed for Narset, appear to be keeping them to the appropriate level of play, though we'll continue to keep an eye on them. And this is from the Rules Committee for Commander. So let's go ahead and take a look at Hullbreacher, and then we'll compare it to Narset and Notion Thief in a minute. I want to discuss why it's overpowered and why it has a bad pattern of play. In case you are fortunately unfamiliar with this card, it is 2 blue for a 3/2 with Flash, Merfolk Pirate. If an opponent would draw a card except for the first one they draw on each of their turns, instead you create a treasure token. So it takes that draw away and gives treasure to the controller. Now this in a vacuum doesn't seem terrible by any stretch of the imagination. The problem comes in is when it's used against somebody who's trying to draw a lot of extra cards, specifically wheeling effects. If you're unfamiliar with those, they discard some number of cards for each player and they draw that many cards or some such effect like that. And they can stop everybody from drawing anything because it's not the first card of the turn almost ever. I actually can't think of a scenario where it is. And it gives a bunch of mana to the controller. So it really scoots the controller of this card ahead. It comes down instant speed and is relatively cheap to cast. The problem with it is, of course, is that it doesn't necessarily win you the game immediately. It just makes it so you'll win a lot faster than your opponents, to the point where a lot of players might even just scoop it up. So the problem comes in when you use Hullbreacher, flash it in against a wheel, but you can also use a wheel yourself or a wheeling type of effect, Jace's Archivist or Magus of the Wheel, maybe even if you want to go into the 7 drops Dragon Mage, but then you get all the advantage and your opponents don't. Great. It's a game, sometimes that happens. However, it makes the game miserable for everyone else, and it basically makes the game hover around that card itself, either to steal it, clone it, kill it, something. It just has to be gotten rid of that way. Now, I said at the beginning, there's a lot of people that aren't happy with the ban that I saw online anyway, and I didn't really see any good reasons as to why it would be banned, except one person did point out it stops like abusive amounts of card draw. But I mean, yes, it does, but that's it, I guess, in its favor. So, I don't know. The myriad of downside to this card, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, is just so much more. Just so much more to this. So let's get into that. So off the top of my head, I have 5 problems with this card, besides it being at instant speed and stopping card draw. It's a very multifaceted, problematic card. It has that instant speed response to any extra drawing effects, and you can use it offensively. It stays on the field being a stack effect, so it's not like a one-time thing and then you can start going again. And it can push the user into possible, I guess you could say, overdrive, or give them an insurmountable advantage, especially if they took away all of your resources that you had in hand, especially in casual tables. And I think some of the subtler things about the card are that once your opponents lack those resources, they can't use anything offensive to kill it necessarily unless they have it at the time, or because it's a creature. I know that's usually a downside that people say, it's like, oh, it's a creature, it can be killed, but creatures can also be protected more easily than other permanents and be recurred more easily than other permanents. I mean, Hullbreacher Sun Titan, Hullbreacher Animate Dead, Hullbreacher Eternal Witness. Yes, it doesn't put it on the battlefield, but you get the idea. Hullbreacher being a creature means it can come back a lot more easily and be recurred by, every color except red, because it's not an artifact, and you can probably do that anyway with a bunch of finagling. So, yeah, it being a creature is no downside to this card, in my opinion. So it just creates a myriad of problems, and as a person who has faced this card multiple times, I'm never happy to see this card. I had one, I never played that card, and actually I immediately went to sell the card, because if you follow me on the channel here, if something stops somebody from playing Magic and I feel it's to the point where, oh, this turn you can't play something, and that's it, if it's over that, then I don't play that card. This card created a one-sided situation all the time. I had it used against me just a few days ago when I tried to play Ancient Excavation, trying to look for an answer against the player who played it, obviously. But it's a real feel-bad moment when I wasn't actually gaining any card advantage, just card selection, and they cast a Hullbreacher. I wasn't there for the time when somebody cast a Hullbreacher on somebody else's wheel, and the game had to sit for another 2 hours. Literally a 3-hour-long game. It doesn't promote any good play patterns, and yes, it could be used more competitively and such, but I, for one, am glad this card is gone, and it'll hopefully stay gone for a very long time, if forever, which I also like. So that's fine with me. But we do have two other cards to compare this to, and while people are saying, why aren't these banned? Why aren't these banned? They do the same thing almost. They're very close. And I'm going to try to give you at least my perspective as to why Hullbreacher is by far the worst choice. And I don't like seeing these other cards either, but this one is so asymmetrical compared to these next two that I don't think it's even a real contest. Please welcome Narset, Parter of Veils, 1 blue for a planeswalker that starts with 5 loyalty, and the focus of this card is each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn. So you get your card draw for the turn, but not any extra card draw. Now, in the article, they stated that because this is sorcery speed and you can't flash it out to a wheel or something, and there has to be that extra step, and you know it's coming, basically, that it is more fair. And on that premise, I agree. And I hate playing against this card too. But it's also not giving your opponents a shit ton of mana and punishing you at the same time, and at instant speed. And they get to follow up with whatever else they're going to follow up. They still have to commit to the board, one, Narset, which as a planeswalker is more vulnerable necessarily than, say, an enchantment or something. It's less vulnerable than Hullbreacher, but harder to recur, especially if you're just in blue. I don't think blue recurs planeswalkers at all. You need something else. Beyond that, you need to cast said wheel or have a wheel effect, so this is a very telegraphed move that people can start preparing for, hopefully as soon as possible. Yes, of course you can't get it off, and it's a giant pain in the ass. The problem with Hullbreacher is every time somebody's going to draw a card that's supposed to be extra or something, if they really want to or have an effect they can't necessarily get rid of, that person's going to get extra mana. And they can just hold on to that mana forever if they want to. Narset's just going to make it so you can't draw any cards, besides the first one. Not nearly as bad. Plus, there's a lot of ways to kill her. Red has burn, white can exile it, green can trample over and smack it around the, in the face, black can get rid of it, blue can bounce it. So, because it's sorcery speed, it's telegraphed. It doesn't give mana advantage to the opponent who's playing it, or I guess you if you're playing it. It's a much fairer card than Hullbreacher, a lot less one-sided, and yes, it can be sucked to be wielded by Narset, especially if they have the mana already to follow up with something else. They have to have that there and ready. They're not getting free mana off Narset, they are getting it off Hullbreacher. So while Narset is still kind of a pain to play against, it is much more fair than the Hullbreacher. and you do have to commit extra blue to it, I guess is a thing. But again, it's a little bit more vulnerable than the Hullbreacher in some instances, especially if you have the removal or something. But overall, I think Narset, Parter of Veils, doesn't necessarily deserve a ban yet. Yes, you can use her offensively like the Hullbreacher, but not at instant speed. And people will see it coming, so it is telegraphed, which also gives your opponents an opportunity for interaction. Which I know for competitive play isn't the best, but for casual play, it's very good. And here's the next card, Notion Thief. 2 blue-black for a 3/1 human rogue. Rogue, by the way. Flash, if an opponent would draw a card except for the first one he or she draws during each of her draw steps. Instead, that player skips that draw and you draw the card. So here we have something where it stops your opponents from drawing except for the first card on their turns, on their draw steps. And it gives the opponent who controls Notion Thief a card. So this one's a little bit better than Narset, I would say. Only because it does stop your opponents from drawing any extra cards, and you get cards in return. However, this one, they say in the article, is more restrictive because 1, it costs 4 not 3, and 2, it also has black in its color identity, thereby limiting the amount of decks it can go in. I would also say that it being 3/1 also makes it extremely fragile as a creature and not 3/2, which sometimes that extra toughness is you can't do it. I don't know why. Even in Commander, sometimes you just need to be able to poink something with 1 point of damage. Inferno Titan, any of that stuff would be great. I do have to point out again, though, that while this does give your opponents card draw and it does stifle any of your extra effects for drawing cards, that it doesn't give them the mana to cast those cards. Much like Narset, Parter of Veils, who also stops you from drawing any extra cards, but not your card for turn. This doesn't give your opponent any extra advantage on mana to cast the things they are getting. I do believe this potential card, even with the black in its color identity, is stronger than Narset because, well, it's a creature, and I already covered that Hullbreacher being a creature I think is actually a benefit rather than a detriment. It can be recurred, it can be bounced, it can be protected. The other thing with this card is that, yes, I think it's stronger than Narset because it does give card advantage to the player who controls it, and that's never necessarily good for your opponents. But the real thing to consider here is that it doesn't give that free mana by stopping any extra effects, especially if you're forcing those effects on your opponent, which can be a thing. So it's not giving them any extra resources to cast those spells, like I keep saying. So I feel like this card, I agree that they should be watching these cards, especially if people try to abuse them like they did Hullbreacher to get all that stuff back. But I feel like these cards just can't be abused in the same capacity because of that lack of mana. They're already denying resources to the opponents. Why would you also get resources in return? You'd have to steal those resources, and that's a whole other archetype of deck. Here's Hullbreacher again. I just wanted to cover some of the things that I saw on the internet. I covered a little bit of that in the beginning. I wanted to cover it a little bit more specifically now. There are some people upset with the ban, and of course, some people have pet cards, some people don't like the fact that was banned, and we'll get into some of those reasons. Other people feel that less bans is always good, but I don't know what to say to that. I feel like bans make the format healthy. I don't think there should be any extra bans than necessary. What's necessary, that's a whole other discussion and a whole other video. It's also just an opinion. In either case. So some of the things I saw about Hullbreacher being banned are, like I said, there wasn't a lot of depth to a lot of the arguments. Some of them were just like, I just bought this card, and now I'm upset because I wasted that money. And I totally get that. Wasted money does suck, especially because this card was so expensive even from the get-go. So I do feel for them, but I'm not going to say it shouldn't be banned because you spent money. Sorry, I guess. Another argument I saw was that this card was completely fine and didn't have to be banned. I wholeheartedly disagree with that, having played against it and having once dabbled in using it online because I had one. I totally disagree. This card was not fine, especially for the casual side of the format, which is the one I play. It's the one I espouse to everyone because hanging out with friends in a social group or hanging out with other people and having a good time, I think, is as important as playing the game itself. So yes, you should try to win, but this makes things miserable. That's my opinion. So I disagree with it being a just fine card. Another popular comment was they banned this but not Thassa's Oracle. And I can totally see where they're coming from with that. because if you're unfamiliar with the Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation combo, it essentially wins the game for blue, blue, black, if you do it right, which is really hard to mess up. So what happens there is this makes the game miserable and gives insurmountable advantage to your opponent, the Hullbreacher. The Arrow one wins you the game. That's the difference. Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation wins the game. It doesn't cause you to have to sit there and not play Magic and or scoop to your opponents, even if that's something you are fine with doing. It wins the game for the person who played it if there's no interaction. Hullbreacher, yes, will promote the winning of the controller of the game, or to the game, but it won't win them the game almost immediately, ever, for any reason at all. It's miserable. You either scoop, or you try to play through it, while they have all the advantage from one 3-drop card, and you have squat diddly nothing. So that's the difference there. I do appreciate people wanting to ban Thassa's Oracle. I've experienced the combo myself from the other side of the table since I don't use it, and it is annoying and it is surprising. But I think the comparison to the Thoracle combo and Hullbreacher is a little bit off. So that's just my opinion on it. There is another comment I wanted to address specifically that I saw some people actually say, and I guess people are entitled to their opinion, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to be giving my opinion in this video. You can always tell me if you disagree, agree, or say something I missed in the comments below, of course. But I actually saw a few people say that when they cast this card, they shouldn't have to care about the fun their opponents are having playing this game. And I took an issue with that as a casual Commander player who plays Commander specifically for the semi-random nature and fun and interaction I can have with people who play this game, that they don't consider the fun of their opponents. Now, if you're playing CEDH, I can see where that comes in. If you're playing a high-powered casual game and something's on the line, I can see where that comes in. There's certainly a place for that. But to completely disregard your opponents having fun for this card is, in my opinion, I think you're playing the wrong format. I don't know. This is a completely a personal opinion, so that's all I'm going to say there. That does it for this episode of the Dice Bag. Hullbreacher's been banned in Commander, good for the format or not. I'm firmly on the side of this is fantastic. Personally, this has made my day. Sorry to those who either spent money or really enjoyed this card. I hated the one-sided nature of it. It wasn't only one-sided, it was a double-edged sword where you're taking both edges to the face and your opponent is basically leaning on it. I don't know what to say. I'm ecstatic. But if you have a different opinion or I missed something that you thought may be important to this conversation, of course, let me know in the comments below. This is a community after all, and I am keeping an open mind because maybe somebody will change mine. In either case, until the next time, game, dice bag video, or just when you're out in the world, stay safe out there.